Hello everyone.
I'm Chris
Hi,
from
Chris.
Lagan College. Can you tell me in one sentence what Labour stands for?
That is a good question, Chris. What I would say we stand for, most of all at this time, is making our economy work better for most working people in this country. Because I think our economy works only for a few people at the top at the moment. And I think it's got to work for everyone. And I think what people are finding, and what people have been finding for a lot of years now, is that they haven't been able to make ends meet. And so we stand most of all for that, and also for a fairer, more just, more equal society. That's why I came into politics.
Hi, I'm Sophie from St Tyler's High School. When your party left the government, the Treasury left a note saying there was no money left, and in 5 years' time, I'll be paying tax. Why should my tax be used to cover a debt that I didn't create?
Well, let me explain what I think happened and why we've got a deficit, because it's an important question. Lots of people ask that question. What we saw around the world was a global financial crisis. So we saw, and you see it in America, you've got President Obama who's trying to deal with a deficit, and you see lots and lots of countries of the world trying to deal with it. I think the question is, how do you deal with that? Because, I don't think it was because of Labour spending on schools and hospitals and other things that we ended up with a high deficit. I think it's because what happened was that we lost a lot of our tax revenue because of financial services, what happened in financial services, and we had to bail out the banks, as lots of people know. The question is, how do we now get out of it? How do we now get out of the problem? My argument with the government is the way they've gone about that, cutting very far and very fast in what they're doing, isn't actually working. And so we're ending up borrowing more, not for good things, but to keep people out of work. So we're paying a lot more money now for people to be unemployed, but that obviously costs money, people drawing benefits, and we've got fewer people paying their taxes. In terms of you and when you go into the workforce, I would want, if Labour was back in office in 2015, to make sure we reduce the deficit, because I think it's very important, but I also think it's important that we make sure that we provide good opportunities for you, because it's right to say we've got to reduce the deficit, but it's also right to say we've got to provide opportunities for our young people.
My name is Cathedral, and I come from Copeland Community School. I know people who have sought asylum because of war. It wouldn't be welcoming if you deny them coming. So how do you propose to help those people who are seeking asylum in the UK if you were in charge?
Well, my father came here in 1940 seeking asylum with his father. He was 16 years old and he was living in Belgium at the time. And obviously the Nazis, Adolf Hitler, they were moving into Belgium, and so he came here. So I think it's really important that Britain is a place where people who are refugees, who are genuinely fleeing from persecution, are able to come. And I think that's a very proud tradition. I wouldn't be sitting here today if that hadn't happened for my family. My mother also, her family suffered during the Holocaust, and she came here after the Second World War. So I wouldn't be here if we hadn't offered a refuge for my family. And so I think we've always got to do that. People have concerns about immigration, but that's something we've always got to do as a country.
I'm Chris from Lagan College.
Do you get to ask all the questions, Chris?
Labour were behind the Olympics coming to the UK.
Yeah.
However, many people in Northern Ireland, including me, feel that they have little to no benefit from the Olympics, and that funding health and education should take priority over such a luxury event. What stance do you and your party take on this opinion?
Well, that is interesting. Do you feel then that you may have researched this, do you feel that Northern Ireland is getting no benefit from the Olympics? Because one of the things that we've tried to do, both parties, when we were in power, now when the Conservatives and Liberal Democrats are in power, is try and make sure that all parts of the United Kingdom got benefit from the Olympics.
Well, I think I feel that we won't benefit as much from tourism and things like that as a legacy, because we're not on the mainland. So I don't think the public will get as much as their money from their taxes back in tourism and local business.
I can see that. Well, look, the way I feel about the Olympics is that I think we have tried, when the Olympics was brought to London, to make sure that every part of the country got some benefit from it. I think it's also right to say that it's going to be a fantastic event, and I think what do I really want the legacy from that to be? Also, we want it to be a fantastic couple of weeks for people, the Olympics and the Paralympics, but also it should inspire a whole new generation of young people into sport, and I think that's a really great thing. So I'm not sure you can measure these things simply in sort of pounds and pence. I think it is actually the chance to have this kind of big national spectacle here and the chance to inspire a whole generation of people. You know, if you talk to some of the really kind of older people in Britain, they remember the Olympics of 1948 that was here. And I suspect lots of people will be glued to their tellies and will be watching it. So I take the point about making sure every part of the UK benefits. I think it will be a fantastic national moment there as well.
Okay, so you think that the history and the memories will be worth the money that's paid out?
I think they will. I think it was right to sort of bid for it, and I think it was right to say, look, we want Britain to be a massive focus. I also think it will actually, if you're talking about pounds and pence, it will provide a spotlight on London and indeed on the whole of the United Kingdom for the world. And I think actually lots of people thinking about investing in Britain will think, well, actually, you know, we'll be reminded of what Britain has to offer. So, look, there's always swings and roundabouts with these things, but I'm very pro the Olympics.
Hi, Ed.
Hi.
I'm Will from Corby Business Academy.
Hi, Will.
The coalition government have decided to reduce the country's debt by cutting county council budgets, 70 million from my own county as well. Do you feel Labour shares responsibility for this?
Is that having an effect on you, Will? Does that having an effect on some of the services that you or your family rely on?
Like, say, for example, our county has been cut by £70 million, so some of the cuts that they've had to make for the local people has involved maybe streetlights being turned off, which has also been affecting my safety, because attacks and kind of accidents have increased ever since they've been turned off.
Right, well, I'm sorry to hear that. So, we would have been making cuts if we had been in government now. Okay. But we wouldn't have been going so far and so fast as this government was. And, you know, it's interesting, because I've talked to a lot of local council leaders over the last 18 months or so that I've been doing this job, and they all say the same thing, which is, look, we could have made some reductions in spending, but it was the scale that we were being asked to make has made it really difficult, has made it really hard for us, and we've had to cut into essential services. So really my answer to you is we would have been making some reductions, but it wouldn't have been of that scale, and I think that would have been done a better job in protecting people's services.
But do you feel Labour was responsible for it or not?
I think it goes back to the answer that I said earlier on, which is that I think it was the global financial crisis that happened, and that happened in every country. And as I say, President Obama isn't having to deal with the deficit because it's Labour that's responsible. He's having to deal with it because he had a global financial crisis. I've said also we should have regulated the banks better. That was, you know, one of the issues that we've had, and I think we should acknowledge that. So I don't say everything we did was right, but I think that the Conservatives kind of want to say, oh, well, it's all Labour's fault. I don't think that's fair, and I don't think it's also fair to say we shouldn't have spent the money on schools and hospitals, because I think that is you know, the new schools in this country. I know I went to a comprehensive which was a pretty kind of old Victorian building, and that has now been replaced by a new school, and that was, you know, I wouldn't take that back. I'd say that was the right thing to have done.
Okay. So do you feel that it was a coincidence that the banks happened to start collapsing, if you will, when Labour was in government?
I don't think it was a coincidence. I think it's because governments around the world, including our government, didn't do enough to regulate the banks. And I'm totally acknowledge that. We should have done more to regulate the banks. And I think that's a lesson that we've got to learn in the future about how we make sure that that kind of thing doesn't ever happen again.
All right, thank you.
Hi, I'm Jennifer from Bannockburn High School.
Hi, Jennifer.
I watched Prime Minister's Question Time yesterday, and you said to David Cameron that he had broken his promise about child benefits.
Yeah.
How would you handle the child benefit issue if you were in power?
Good question. Thank you for watching Prime Minister's Questions. I'm not sure it's the most enlightening experience for people, but anyway, look, on child benefit, we wouldn't have been doing what he's doing. I believe in universal child benefit. I believe in child benefit going to everybody. People say, well, is that about child benefit for millionaires? Well, no, that's not the thing I care most about. But what I care about is the families that are actually being affected by David Cameron's change. So he's cutting child benefit from a family where one person works on about £45,000, but at the same time he's saying to a family where two people work on £40,000 each, a family income of £80,000, you know, you're going to keep getting child benefit. I don't think that's fair. Now, you might then say, well, look, why do people who are relatively well off, you know, they're clearly better off than other people, why do they need child benefit? I think that on the National Health Service, on child benefit, on pensions, those are things that we kind of get for free in this country, or we get in the case of child benefit and pensions. And that's because we're citizens of this country. And that's because either we're a family that has children, or because we, you know, get old and we get an old age pension. And I think, you know, we pay our taxes for that. So I think that, you know, I don't think we should just say we should get rid of all of these universal, so-called universal benefits like child benefit.
So what would you do if you were in power? Would you?
We'd be keeping child benefit if we were in power. Can I promise you, as an important thing to say, can I promise you in 3 years' time, if the government goes ahead with the change that they're making, that we will have the money to reverse it? We'll have to see whether we have the money by knowing what, what the state of the public finances, the state of the books is.
I'm Maisie from Rosedale High School. Now that the tuition fees are at £9,000, if you're in power, would you consider lowering them back to £3,000 or abolishing them completely?
Well, here's what we've said, Maisie. We've said that if we were in power now, we'd be cutting them to a maximum of 6,000. That's not all the way back to 3,000, which is what some people would want, but it's what we think is affordable. How would we pay for that? The government is saying they're going to cut taxes for the banks over the coming years. We think that's not the right priority. So with a combination of using some of that money and by saying some higher earning graduates would have to pay a bit more, we think we can have a lower maximum tuition fee. I'd like to go further than that, but it goes back to the earlier answer I gave. I'm not going to make a promise that I'm not sure I can keep. But why do I say that? Because I think we've got to be investing in the future of young people. And we've had questions about the debt and the deficit, and that's of course an important issue. But if you solve the problem of the deficit by loading it all onto the next generation, well, then you've defeated your whole purpose. Because if the purpose was we don't want the next generation to be burdened with debt, but you put the debt onto the next generation through tuition fees and other things, well that's actually making it worse, because that's targeting the next generation. And I feel really strongly, and I think about my own kids in this, I used a phrase I call the promise of Britain, which is that the next generation does better than the last. And I think, I don't want to sound gloomy about it, but I think my generation isn't doing enough to make sure that the next generation actually has the chances we had, and that's why we've taken the position we have on tuition fees.
Hi, I'm Vanjie from Bannockburn. English students need to pay to come to university in Scotland, whereas Scottish and EU students don't have to study there for free. Do you feel this is fair?
Well, as far as the issue of the Scottish students is concerned, that's an issue of devolution. That's what we've got, a system in Britain and the United Kingdom where the Welsh government, the Scottish government and the government in Northern Ireland make their own decisions over a range of things. And so the government in Scotland has made a different choice. Actually, the government in Wales have also made a different choice to keep the tuition fee at £3,000. I'd like, as far as English students are concerned, to lower the tuition fee, as I've said. So I think it's a decision for different countries to make, fundamentally. And I know it's going to look to some people like, well, why is that fair? Well, that is actually devolution. We're giving money money goes to the Scottish government and they can make decisions. Now, I think it's not fair for students in England to be paying the tuition fee of £9,000, which is why I want to change it.
I'm Poppy from Ribblesdale.
Hi, Poppy.
Since Labour brought in private companies to the NHS, first, why do you oppose the current changes, and do you agree with making profits from the NHS?
Well, let me just say this. We brought in the private sector in quite a very limited role. I think it's like 2 or 3% of total NHS operations. Why did we do that? Because we were looking at the waiting times for operations, and we were thinking, well, it's really hard to get those waiting times down. And so for some pretty standard operations like cataract operations, other operations, let's use the private sector in addition to the NHS. What worries me about what the government is doing, I think it is actually something quite different. They're saying up to half of the beds in an NHS hospital can be given over to the private sector. And I think that kind of, really radical move, what am I worried about? I'm worried about the service to the patient, fundamentally. And I'm worried that what people will find is hospitals are in financial trouble, so they say, well, we're going to have lots more private beds, and so our NHS patients are going to have to wait longer. And then you end up back where we were 15 years ago, where, look, if you pay, you get quick treatment, and if you are on the NHS, you have to wait. So that's my worry about what the government is doing with their plans.
You have a particular reason for asking this question,
Yeah, it's because my mum's a nurse.
Your mum's a nurse.
Yeah.
What does she think of the plans?
I don't think she really likes them. I think she thinks the profit should be going back into the NHS.
Well, I agree with her.
Yeah.
I'm Lamise, I'm from St Tyler's High School, which is in Cardiff. Under Labour, youth unemployment increased. If in future you become Prime Minister, how do you decrease the number of unemployed youth?
Well, what we would do straight away is we would levy a tax on the bankers' bonuses, and we know there's lots of those around, and we'd use that money to put young people back to work, to create jobs for young people. We've seen the number of young people out of work for more than 6 months go up by, I think it's doubled over the last year, and I just think that is just such a waste of talent. And that's such a waste of you know, the lives of young people, and we've got to take action on that. So we would take action. Youth unemployment did go up during the recession that happened. And you know, long-term youth, I think it's particularly this thing of people being out of work a long time. You know, if you're out of work for a few months, it's really tough and hard and difficult. But if you're out of work for a year or 2 years, then you really lose all touch with, you know, the world of work.
Hi Ed, I'm Keelan from Lagan College. Do you agree?
What do you think about the Olympics? Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I agree with what Chris said.
You agree with Christopher, right? Okay.
Yeah. Do you agree that it's unfair that one man can have so much control over the media, and that therefore more regulation needs to be put in place to maintain impartiality?
You're talking about Rupert Murdoch?
Yeah.
Yes, is the answer. I do think that. I think there's lessons for all politicians, and all of us, I guess, will have followed a bit the whole business of phone hacking and so on. There's lessons for all politicians, which is that politicians became too close to particular organisations, including probably to Rupert Murdoch, I think, and it's not just Conservative politicians. And, you know, I've said before that I think that Rupert Murdoch, he owns Sky, and he owns The Times and The Sun, and now The Sun on Sunday, and I think that's too much. And I've said before that I think we've got to look at how much of our media is one person allowed to own. And, you know, it's not because of a particular view I've got about him, but I think it's just when organisations have so much power, they think, well, they don't have to answer to anybody. And I'm afraid that's the culture, I think, that seemed to develop at News International.
I'm Harry from Corby Business Academy. In a few years' time, I will need a job. I'm worried about jobs being taken by the rising number of immigrants. What would you and the Labour Party do to restrict immigration?
We've got 27 countries in Europe. There's free movement of labour within Europe. Now you might say, well, why do we allow that? Well, we partly allow it because it's of benefit to people in Britain, because there are 2 million people from Britain working in other European countries. We can't stop free movement of labour in Europe. What we could have done, and this was a mistake we made in government, we could have, in the transition for new countries coming into the European Union, been more cautious about how quickly you could have that free movement. So that's on European the Europe situation in Europe. Outside Europe, I've just got a simple view, which is there's of course the case around refugees, which we talked about earlier, but essentially we should let people in who have a skill and something to contribute. Because I think if there's something that they can add, that they can help us with, they can help create wealth and jobs in this country, then that's good. But there's a bigger answer I just want to give you. In the end, whether there are enough jobs here, of course it's partly about making sure that we have the right policy on immigration, but it's also about making sure that we have an economy that's doing well and creating jobs. You know, if our economy was run better, in my view, we could create lots of jobs for you when you leave school or university, and lots of other people. So, you know, we've got to get our immigration policy right, but we've got to get our economic policy right too.
I'm Danny from Copeland School. I live in Brent, and instead of joining youth clubs and getting involved with the community, I think that a lot of young people are joining gangs, and this is really worrying me and my classmates about our own safety. And if you were in power, what would you do about this?
Well, Danny, I haven't done this so far, but tell me what you think we should do. I'll give you my own answer in a minute, but tell me what you think.
I think that the number of youth clubs like Connections, L'Employ, I know that got shut down, but L'Employ, Connections, those kind of places where children can get one-to-one support and talk to someone who's had, say, the same or similar experiences that they have, where they can feel at home. And even if they're having a rough time at home with their parents, if, say, they don't live with their dad or something, they can talk to someone that they trust.
Well, I think it's a really good answer, probably a better answer than I'll give you. I mean, I think, for me, it's all about hope. If you can offer people hope, which is not about gangs, which is not about doing the wrong thing, then you're much more likely to get them away from the path of doing the wrong thing. And that is partly about youth clubs, it's partly about jobs. I went and talked to lots of people after the riots that happened in August, and just talked to them about their own experiences. And I just remember one young man saying to me, look, I came from an area, and people just told me there was nothing good came out of my area. But actually then some people came in and helped me and said, look, you've got something to contribute. And now he's working as a sports instructor for one of the charities. And it sort of shows you that you can't write off areas of the country and you can't write off people. If you actually give them opportunity, if you give them hope, then actually you can get people to do the right thing. I don't say that everybody will always do the right thing, but I think, you know, hope kind of beats, you know, gang culture if you can provide the right sort of hope for people.
But what about safety of the children in the community who have no intention of joining a gang and have a bright future, but is blurred by the gangs, the lure of the gangs?
Well, look, that is terrible, and that's why you've also got to have proper policing. And you do have to, when people do the wrong thing, they've got to be punished. But it's much better, I think it's sort of what you were saying, it's much better to kind of take people away from that path if you possibly can. One thing I'll say about youth services, I don't know what people's experiences of youth clubs and youth services around the country, it's one of the biggest things that's been cut as a result of the cuts that have been made. Now, why is that? Because local authorities have certain duties they've got to carry out, and youth services isn't one of them. That's more like an optional thing that they can do. And so that's ended up being something that has been cut, and I think that's tragic, because I think it's like one of the most important things. Not all youth clubs are good. I know from my own constituency where I'm an MP that some of the young people are a bit dubious about some of the youth clubs, but, I think that can make a big difference.
How do you feel about the proposal to lower the voting age to 16 for the Scottish referendum only, and do you believe this should be mirrored in further elections?
Well, I think it's a really important question. I think we've got to look right across the board at votes, at the age of voting, and I'm a supporter of votes at 16. Why am I a supporter of it? Well, I think it's partly a sort of equality justice issue, which is that you can leave school, you can go to work, you can pay taxes, you can even get married, I think, with parental consent at the age of between 16 and 18, but you can't vote. But also, just a very simple thing, politicians take notice of people who can vote. And, if you think about the decision on the Educational Maintenance Allowance, the EMA, I think the government would have been much less likely to do it in the way they had if you'd had 16 to 18-year-olds who were saying, we can vote you out. I think it's 1.5 million people between 16 and 18. So, on sort of both grounds of principle and engaging more young people, I'm a supporter.
Do you get along well with your brother?
Definitely.
Can you do any good impressions?
Can I do any good impressions? Yeah. No, I'm sort of happy being myself. I think someone was telling me that Rory Bremner finds it very hard to do an impression of me the other night, so which I'm pleased about, actually.
Does your mum still tell you what to do?
Yes, she does still tell me what to do. My mum, yeah, definitely. No, she's very, very supportive, and I think whenever you're in one of these high-profile jobs, it's always hardest for your family because you're the person in the job, and so you're actually doing the job. But they're the people who are sort of around you and have to be kind of, supportive. So actually, to be fair to my mum, she doesn't really try and tell me what to do. She's just sort of generally kind of, she's there for moral support, like my wife, Justine.
What does your wife call you?
What does she call me? She calls me sweetie sometimes, but generally she calls me Ed.
What about when she's cross with you?
Oh, she still calls me Ed. She doesn't call me Edward or anything. No, she's a very patient person, actually.
When you were younger, did you and your brother ever have fights about who got to sit in the front seat of the car?
I wonder why you asked that question. No, we didn't. We both went into the leadership election knowing it would be a big sort of media thing. But both of us thought, well, look, if we both feel we've got something to say, for one or either of us to be told you can't stand is not a good thing. And the sort of resolution we had was, we must make it a genuinely brotherly contest. Neither of us is going to say anything bad about the other one. And we stuck to that. And I think that's served us in good stead. And, we've sort of moved on from it.
So did you actually did you sit down and think about it before it
Definitely.
happened?
Definitely. We sat down and talked about it.
Do you listen to music a lot? And if so, what do you listen to?
I'm afraid I listen to quite a lot of bad 1980s music, actually. Yeah, I know, that's really... You look pretty disappointed. What do you listen to? What should I be listening to?
Ed Sheeran.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
Do you listen to that, Martha?
I do. I know all about him. From Framlingham, won a Brit. Thank you.
Done.
Thank you.
Are there any reality TV shows that you would like to take part in, like X Factor?
Definitely not. I think there's people who do X Factor and so on. I think it must be incredibly tough. I mean, politics is a bit like X Factor, but it's not quite the same.
You can get voted out.
You can get voted out. Well, listen, thank you very much. I really enjoyed it. I think the other thing I would say is I think it's really good you've taken part in this, but politics needs young people in it.
Malcolm, that was great. Really good. Really good.